Hello, everybody on Facebook Live. This is Frank Washkuch from PRWeek. I'm happy to be joined by Michael Lasky of Davis and Gilbert this week. He's our special podcast guest. Diana Bradley is here as our sidekick for this. Actually, that's undervaluing of you a bit, isn't it?
That's fair.
That's fair?
Yeah.
Okay. So we're going to start recording in just a few minutes, and thank you again for joining us on this edition of the PRWeek podcast. Perry, I'm going to start in 3, 2, 1. Hello, everyone, and welcome to this edition of the PRWeek, PRWeek's weekly podcast on everything going on in the worlds of PR, marketing, and communications. My name is Frank Washkuch. I'm the news editor at PRWeek, and our special guest this week is Michael Lasky of Davis and Gilbert. Michael, welcome.
Thank you, Frank.
So you're a bit of an unusual guest for us. We usually don't have a legal mind on the podcast with us.
Well, I think, I'm here to tell you that lawyers can be both problem solvers and also the people that create some opportunities, as well as think holistically and creatively.
Mm-hmm.
And, those are not inconsistent ideas. So
very, very cool. Well, we're looking forward to what you have to say this week. Diana Bradley is with us. She's our senior reporter at PRWeek, who covers consumer PR and marketing. Diana, thanks again for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
All right. So, Michael, let's lead off with you. So tell us, what are the major issues that you hear about in terms of marketing and communications nowadays?
Well, there are many.
Mm-hmm.
And we all know, when you at PRWeek widely cover the rapidity of the transformation that clients are facing, that companies, that industries across all sectors are facing, and what that is meaning for marketing communications firms. Because of that, there's an old adage from Felix Frankfurter, a long deceased but prominent former Supreme Court Justice, U.S. Supreme Court Justice, and his quote was that the law responds to the felt needs of society. I think about it a lot as it relates to businesses and transformation, because the notion is that the right business and legal fix to problem solving and opportunistic situations increase substantially in times of transformation. So with that as an overview, the key issues affecting the industry, certainly from my perspective, include a whole host of things. One, certainly talent. And I think, frankly, a new kind of talent, both a shortage of talent and a different definition of what the firm of today, let alone the firm of tomorrow, looks like. There are many firms that now have a good portion of their workforce in data and analytics. A firm like W2O, something like 200 plus of its 600 plus employees are in data analytics. I think also in the talent area, there's probably more of a need forever in an information-rich age to have people that, what I like to call, view the world holistically, that are able to cross-train, that are not narrow and specialized in a specific either discipline, but can look at a very client-centric approach to problems, and that means everything from who you're hiring to how you're staffing. So and even how you're incentivizing your employees. So I think talent is certainly one area which is affecting the marketing communications industry very dramatically, and the legal issues, business and legal issues that should be combined and are really in tandem. A second issue that I see is an issue of increased need for specialization, depth and breadth, and that is causing a lot of stresses and strains, as well as opportunities. So my firm and I, because of our long time commitment to the industry, both narrowly defined and broadly defined. The firm's 110 years old. We represented old media when it was new media, literally putting the first radio spots on the air for Procter & Gamble in the early part of the 20th century. And so we've been sort of synonymous with the commercialization of the message and the monetization of the message in every medium that has evolved. So today, what the specialization means is that as we study from our vantage point trends in the industry, and we actually recently conducted such a study. Last year there were 103 M&A transactions, merger and acquisition transactions involving public relations firms. That's a remarkably high, we're talking about worldwide and publicly reported. It's a remarkably high number. It was 89 deals the prior year. And why those deals are happening, the size of the deal, and who the buyer is part of the larger issue of the kinds of transformation for the needs of specialization. It also goes hand in hand with the need for talent. Some acquisitions are actually all about acquiring talent.
Well, it's interesting that you say that, because one thing that you hear when you talk to folks out in the industry is that in terms of the bigger to mid-size agencies, there's nobody left to acquire anymore. So, but you're seeing the number gone up. So,
well, that's an interesting. My comment and yours are in tandem. So you could. The data shows that a full 35% of the 103 transactions that occurred last year were in firms with revenues of $3 million and under. Another approximately 10% were in the 3.1 to 10 million size. So it absolutely positively is it was the year of the small tuck-in transaction to allow big firms to get bigger. The other interesting trend in the industry is who the buyers were. A full 66% of those 103 deals were by independent buyers. So many strong mid-sized firms these days are buyers, not sellers. So it's not just, it would be myopic to suggest that it's all about, the big bang, the big deal. And in fact, because of the need for specialization, depth, breadth, vertical specialty, that you're seeing, a lot of very strategically focused deals. I was on the phone with a client this morning where it was, a client looking to acquire a firm in the health sciences, digital, investor relations, or crisis communication world to augment existing practice areas. Now, that's not about big bang.
Right.
That's about, executing against a very specific strategy. So you're seeing, much more work because of the larger issues that are affecting the industry about talent, consolidation, pressure on margin, pressure from clients on budgets. So all of these things are related. And it is actually more difficult for some of the smaller firms to maintain their margin and be specialized. And if they can strip out some of the back office functions to spread the revenue base across a larger playing field, so to speak, there's already an increased level of profitability as well as presumably efficiency, as well as allowing the entrepreneur to perhaps do what he or she does best, which is a client-centric approach to the business.
Right. Now, you mentioned before acquiring to get talent or to bring new talent into an organization. What type of skills are these acquiring firms looking for the most part? Like, where are they trying to get smarter or better?
Well, it's certainly not a one-size-fits-all.
Sure.
But Certainly, I recently asked over 100 firms in a confidential survey the 3 most important hiring practices that have had a positive impact on their revenue in the last 12 months. The top response was hiring employees with expertise in content development and content marketing.
Sure.
The second was training employees on data measurement throughout the firm's practice areas, as opposed to having that siloed in a separate practice area, which is analytics. I mean, the client wants more than ever to understand the data. And the third was, frankly, hiring employees with data and measurement expertise. So those are among, cross specialties: healthcare, digital, tech, public affairs, consumer. Across specialties, those are the trends and those are the kinds of talent that I'm seeing very much in demand.
Now, just to be clear, you don't just work with PR and communications firms. You work with all kinds of marketing firms.
I work with all kinds of marketing firms, and even broader than that.
Right.
My practice, I've been privileged. I've been at Davis and Gilbert for 34 years. I kid and say that I haven't been able to find another job, so I've just stayed for an awfully long time. But maybe that's a little bit out of this week's news about a good friend of mine, Barry Rafferty, and her long history at Ketchum. I'm sure she could have gotten
And
many
we are
other
going
jobs.
to get to that as part
Okay,
of
look at
Diana's news rundown in just a few minutes.
Good. So, so the arc of the firm is we basically work with service sector companies where their key assets are people and ideas.
Okay.
So protecting those ideas, whether it's through copyright or trademark or joint venture agreements, or the people through all sorts of employment arrangements and incentive comp arrangements and the like, that's really a core strategy and area of our focus cross disciplines. But yes, our historic roots and a significant part of our practice is in every aspect of marketing communications.
Right. And what I was leading into there was, is there search for data expertise, statistical expertise? Are you seeing more of a demand for that in the PR area, just because PR firms have generally not been as good at measurement as a lot of other types of marketing firms?
I don't know that I could say it, I would answer it that way, but I guess what I would say, it's being driven by technology.
Okay.
So the good news for the PR industry is that they have been, again, it's not a world of absolutes, but any number of the strong firms are getting a very substantial part of their overall revenues driven by digital. And what's the point of doing that if you can't measure the results of the exercise? So the technology is both evolving so rapidly, the PR firms are capturing so much of that additional digital work that their need in particular to be able to continue to capture a good portion of that digital work makes the need to, measure, analyze, predict, build the algorithms to target more important for them than ever, and probably in fact even more important than some of their brethren and other parts of the sisterhood in the greater marketing communications landscape.
Okay. So one issue we talked a lot about, and I remember working on a story about this over a year ago, and you were a big help when I talked to you on the phone, was this overtime issue. What happened in the years since then? Let me give a little bit of background, because I sold this a little bit short. It was this issue essentially saying that if you were paying employees lower than a certain threshold of salary per year, you couldn't force them to work more than 40 hours a week, essentially, right? What happened with, and a lot of agencies, not necessarily in New York or Washington or San Francisco, but in other parts of the country where wages tend to be lower, at an entry level at an agency were really concerned about this. What happened in the year plus since then?
Well, several things. So, one, to recap the proposed law,
Right.
which in fact did not ultimately go into effect,
Right.
because of the change in administration. But the proposed law was essentially that unless an employee's salary was over a certain dollar level, regardless of where they lived and regardless of what extra benefits you might be paying them in terms of health care or PTO or paid vacation or tuition reimbursement, it was essentially a per se rule, and that unless their salary was over approximately $48,000, no matter how many managerial duties they had in their job, you were required to pay that employee overtime. They were essentially would be required to pay overtime. They were not exempt from the federal overtime laws. There was a long lead time on the comment period, and U.S. Department of Labor took in a lot of comments, including comments, very thoughtful comments from many, both individual firms in the industry as well as the PR Council. I wrote a very thoughtful submission to the Department of Labor, which is posted online. And in response to all of that, the proposed change in the law remained unchanged.
Right.
Because it was impending with a December 31, 2016, or January 1, 2017 effective date, most firms took a careful look at their employee roster,
Right.
and brought people up to a salary level, assuming they had a level of discretion and managerial responsibilities that would essentially make them overtime exempt.
Okay.
So they responded to being prepared for the impending law. Or just were very more, and this was the subject of one of my PRWeek columns, probably about last year in this time. A lot changes in a month these days, let alone a year.
A lot can change in a few hours.
Well,
these days,
in this world, apropos to the transformation of the industry, it all is coming faster.
Yes.
I mean, I think it's all a bit like a snowball going downhill, where the rate of the velocity of change just continues to expand. So what happened essentially is most firms took a hard look. They either were more cautious about how they tracked overtime, or brought people up to a salary level that would make them overtime exempt if they had the requisite degree of discretion and responsibility in their job. The law didn't go into effect, but I don't necessarily think that was a bad thing. Look, if we have a talent shortage, truth be told, clients are smart. In my view, clients can really tell, whether they're being serviced by smart professionals adding real value to their business and at the top of their respective games, or whether they're not. And if you really want to compete for the top talent in a consolidating world where the same services are available at digital agencies and management consulting firms and other types of consultancies, sometimes even accounting firms, these were usually not extreme pay increases, and part of me says it was about time.
All right.
Even though it never became the law. I mean, a lot of times you do the right thing because it's the right thing, not
Sure.
because it's legally required.
All right, Michael, I'm going to put you on the spot. What is the one issue that, if I'm an agency leader, it should be on my radar in the next year?
Well, there's not just one issue.
Okay.
But the one that comes immediately to mind is succession.
Okay.
Okay. I recently conducted a survey of agencies, and it was remarkable the number of firms that had no succession plan. It in fact is one of the reasons for some of the sales, because there isn't a number two that can do the number one job. And there should be some real thought about, and again, this relates to the talent issue, some thought about what smart, forward-thinking firms should be doing to really educate, prepare, and train the next potential group of leaders in leadership development to lead their firms in all the skills that are required in a changing industry. And, you know, it's interesting to me as someone who, again, holistically and is seeing a lot of facets of a problem, you know, by way of example, the Newhouse School at Syracuse is offering for the first time in its executive program here in New York City a course in leadership development. And Elise Mitchell, the now chairman of Mitchell Communications, is teaching the course. And I think it's, you know, and this issue of leadership development, I think is in an ever shrinking senior leadership pool, is an important issue for certainly a whole host of agencies to consider carefully and really put some thought behind. And you know, if economics drive behavior, that also means putting the right economic incentives in place to both train, develop, and reward the conduct that you want to inspire.
Okay. Now, you just mentioned secession, so on that note, I'm going to kick it over to Diana, who is going to tell us, but can I call it a historic change at a top 5 PR firm?
Yep, definitely.
Okay, tell us a little bit more about it.
Sure, she's the first woman to be named CEO of a top 5 global PR firm. Barry Rafferty has now been named global CEO of Ketchum. And Rob Flaherty will continue at the firm as chairman. This is all effective January 1st. So Rafferty will now be taking on more of the day-to-day operations at the firm, working with its leaders on its structure, growth initiatives, and expansion plans. And Rob Flaherty will be increasing his involvement with Ketchum's clients, and also work with Karen Van Bergen, who's CEO of Omnicom Public Relations Group. So it's a big change at the firm, and this all kind of comes right after Omnicom Group CEO John Wren warned during a Q3 earnings call that leadership changes are due at one of the holding company's PR agencies.
Yes, the hunters versus farmers comments.
Yes.
Yes.
And we reached out to Wren and got a comment back from Joanne Trout, who's Omnicom's SVP of Global Communications, and you know, just asking if this was the firm that he had been referring to, and they weren't really commenting. So
but it looks like the hunters won, as they tend to do, don't they?
Yes. Flaherty said he doesn't think Wren's remarks were aimed at Ketchum. He said that this move has been in the works for a long time, so he didn't think that's what he was referring to at all. And he said that Ketchum is doing okay in terms of revenue. He said it's been a challenging year across the industry, and they haven't been entirely immune from that. They're having a phenomenal new business year and a strong fourth quarter.
Okay. So tell us a little bit about the historic nature of this announcement. Why is it a big deal just going beyond the normal CEO transition?
Well, the fact that she's the first woman to be, is that what you mean?
Yeah.
Yeah, first woman to be named CEO of a top 5 global PR firm.
And there have been other women who have led agencies, and very well.
Yeah.
You know, the first name that came to mind was Marcia Silverman, but also, you know, Donna Imperato over at Conan Wolf, of course. I mean, it has, you know, but they haven't been a top 5 firms. So it's really good luck to Barry as she takes on this bigger, expanded role, and
Yeah, it's a
a
big
role
deal.
we will be watching. Michael, you mentioned you know her well.
I do. She's had a long, run at Ketchum, and I think there are 3 thoughts that come to my mind, maybe 4. So, one is, I think, in the story that you ran about the announcement, I think I completely agree with the quote I saw from Rob Flaherty, which was, it's hard to imagine someone better prepared for the job. And that speaks to the various roles, both substantive and longevity and history with the company. The second is cream rises to the top. And that's not an issue about gender. That's about talent. So, I think maybe if you know the skill and talent of Barry, and frankly also her contribution to the industry in significant leadership roles outside of Ketchum, the PR Council, the PRSA chapter in New York, where she was the president. Those are not, that's in addition to the day job.
Sure.
That's a real thought leadership kind of role, and I think, viewing this as it's about time because of the level of talent as opposed to gender is an important comment. My third point is, on the gender issue, it's awfully nice that she's reporting to a woman, and a very, very talented
Good point.
international woman.
Good point.
In Karen Van Bergen.
Right.
So, those are my top 3. My 4th goes to what I'll call succession done right.
Okay.
And this goes to the point you asked me about one of the challenges facing, other firms. And, look, what succession means for the $8 million firm and the $3 million firm and the $25 million firm and the $50 million firm are all different vis-a-vis each other and vis-a-vis Ketchum.
Yeah.
But Ketchum has had seamless succession. I mean, we can go back to Paul Alvarez, to Dave Drobis, to Ray Kocher, to Rob Flaherty, and now to Barry Rafferty. This is a fraternity and sorority of seamless succession, and maybe they've made it look easy, but there's a lot of hard work that goes to getting people to a point where it is natural. An example that comes to my mind is, given that I'm in a law firm partnership and a senior member of my firm, I'm asked all the time is, how do you know when someone's ready to be a partner? And it's, of course, when they are acting and performing at that level where it's evolution, not revolution, that it's almost a foregone conclusion. And that was certainly the case with Barry's elevation.
Interesting stuff. Diana, tell us a little bit about Ford's relationship with WPP and how it looks like that might be expanding.
Sure. So WPP's global partnership with Ford, which is the Marcom's Giants' biggest global client, is being reviewed and may be extended, although final decisions have not been made. A WPP regulatory announcement said this week that on November 27th in Detroit, Ford Motor Company verbally informed WPP that they're considering their future internal and external marketing model and want to enter into a further agreement with WPP for a period to be agreed in 2018.
All right, and a good scooplet here by our colleague in London, Sam
Yeah.
Byrne-James.
Yeah.
So credit to him on this.
Yes.
It's an important account, though, isn't it? Because it's always been, the Ford-WPP relationship has always been closely watched, not just because of the prominence or the size, but because it's was really one of those first accounts that a holding company rolled a team up together of all the sort of smaller parts from different agency disciplines.
Well,
Yeah,
so
Team
interesting.
Detroit.
Yeah.
I can't speak specifically to that issue, but I am struck by certainly one of the larger trends that smart firms are absolutely putting into place to bring very client-centric approaches, cross-firm, cross-discipline, cross-region, to important client relationships. In some of your press and other press that I've read about Barry Rafferty's plans at Ketchum, I've noted that at least I've read between the lines. No inside information here, but I've at least inferred that when she talks about bringing a more holistic approach, client-centric approach to the business, it's what I see among smart firms of a variety of sizes to make it about the client and break down barriers of region, specialty, practice, earned, shared, owned, paid. Another good example of that is what Donna Murphy, the global CEO of Havas Health and You, has done in creating the Havas Village model, which is completely interdisciplinary and completely agnostic to where the person, on whose paycheck the employee is functioning, or in what region. If that employee is part of the Pfizer worldwide team, that's the approach. It's not about fighting over P&Ls. And smart firms, WPP, Ketchum, Havas's Village approach are all trying to do that kind of thing.
And I think we're going to see a lot more of that as it goes forward. Okay, folks, that's about all the time we have for this week's podcast. I'd like to thank Michael Lasky from Davis & Gilbert. Thanks again for joining us.
My pleasure.
And Diana Bradley, who is with us most weeks here on the PR Week podcast. And thanks to our listeners. We hope you are here again next week. Thanks again.